Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dana Shepherd. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the District of Columbia Financial Services Regulatory Sandbox and Innovation Council public meeting. It is 4:13 on Thursday, August 13th. And with that, Mr. Washington, if you could take the roll, please.
Okay. Shahar Abrams.
Here.
Omar Alalami. Omar Alalami. Julian Alcazar. Julian Alcazar. Julian acknowledged that he would not be able to participate today. Marquis Allen.
Present.
Salman Benai.
Present.
Elizabeth Ergubian.
Present.
Jigger Gandhi.
Here.
Thomas Hampton.
Here.
Renee Johnson.
Present.
Laura Kaplan. Laura Kaplan. Drew Maloney. Drew Maloney. Drew acknowledged that he would not be able to participate today. Casey Malden. Casey Malden. Treasure McLean.
Here.
Erica Miles.
Present.
Lindsay Parker. Lindsay Parker. Courtney Robinson. Courtney Robinson. Joshua Rosenthal. Joshua Rosenthal. Joseph Vardner. Joseph Vardner. Dana Shepherd.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. So at this time, let's take a few minutes, not more than a couple, to review the minutes that Mr. Washington sent around. I don't know if all of you have seen them, but should have received an email this morning. So is there any discussion of the minutes?
Like to move to approve the minutes?
Anybody second the motion?
Seconded.
Okay.
Who seconded?
Who seconded the motion, please?
Mr. Bernard.
I did.
Okay, great. All right. Call the roll. Before I call the roll on that, actually, I'll do that and then do the public acknowledgement. So this is on the review and approval of minutes.
Christian, can you see people if they raise their hand?
I can.
You want to try that?
We give it a go.
I mean, I guess if
Not that way, Thomas. Not that way, man.
I don't know if you need a recording. I mean, that's I'm just trying to save a minute, but anyway, I don't.
No, I get it, and only because open government said we had to do roll call for these. We've used the hand function when we had issues, but we'll try to run through this pretty quickly. But it's good to have just in case. So quickly through the roll on the approval of minutes. Jahar.
Yes.
Marquis.
Aye.
Salmon.
Aye.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Jigger.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
Renee.
Aye.
Treasure.
Aye.
Erica. Erica. Come back. Dana.
Aye.
Come back to Erica.
I'm sorry, I missed that. A.
Right.
Aye. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right. Vote passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Next on the agenda, we have old business. Is there any old business to discuss? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 5, the committee reports. Anyone can start off. We have the market committee first, but whoever's ready, please feel free to proceed.
This is Marquis. I can jump in for the Sandbox Structure Committee. We convened on our scheduled committee conference calls. We had 2 that we scheduled since the last Financial Services Council, Financial Services Regulatory Sandbox Council. We had a meeting on July 17th and July the 31st, both at 4 p.m., where we facilitated demos from a couple of potential Sandbox participants, namely Block Apps and Burst IQ. We forwarded the presentation materials to the council members. If anybody on the call did not receive the PowerPoint presentations that either one of those vendors presented, let me know and I could send them out again. A lot of our tasks are ongoing, things that we've been reporting on that we're continuing to research, potential Sandbox vendors, potential participants, incentivization methods for bringing attention to the Sandbox effort, and getting people to participate at different levels, how we can spur interest in participation. We did decide as a group to use the Arizona FinTech Sandbox application document as our template to create the DC Sandbox participant application. Treasurer McLean had reviewed that stringently, as did we all. So we figured it's more sensible to use that as a foundational document and then to customize it for the needs of the district rather than try to reinvent the wheel. We're continuing to have running dialogues in how to format our findings as a committee to the council as a whole and for the report to the mayor. And we're also continuing to review the documentation that we have come up with or that has been circulated amongst the group for precedent with state laws that have done this dance before. Going forward, we're going to continue with our research. We're working to create customizations for the participant application process, again, using the Arizona FinTech application model. We would like to invite participation from the regulatory committee, legislative regulatory committee, to help us figure out what compliance considerations need to be included in the application process and so forth. We also, we had a few items that we wanted to get some feedback on. In addition to the participant application process and what makes sense for the district, we still haven't gotten any feedback from Octo regarding our Sandbox architectural requirements document that our committee submitted June the 29th. Now, I don't know if it's too soon in the process to include them, but we have made mention that they're welcome to participate in the vetting and in everything involved with the implementation of technology. Christian, I know that you had sent out a follow-up missive inviting Octo to provide feedback, and so far we haven't received any. So that effort is ongoing. Another thing that came across my desk after the last vendor demo, the vendor that we spoke to last was very interested in what we're doing, what we're attempting to do in the district. I'm not even going to say that we're attempting, because we've spent too much time, all of us, and energy to say that this is an attempt. We're doing something. But because of their position in the innovation community, they're very interested in aligning with organizations, entities, and so forth that are creating these kinds of collaborative spaces. And they came back to me and asked if they can promote the FSR SIC's efforts in some of their social media campaigns and advertising campaigns. They had said that they are willing to promote our message solely, or a combination of their own message with our approval and so forth. But I did not give anybody approval to disseminate or discuss or advertise any of this, because I indicated that the council and DISP needs to give guidance on what's appropriate. Also, I made it clear that we are still in the inception stages. We're still gathering requirements and presenting them to the mayor. It's possible, however, improbable, I think, that we might not build a sandbox. But in saying that, we don't want to jump the gun. The individuals that have expressed this interest are on hold, but we'd like to get some feedback on what to tell them, if there's a timeline, if we just tell them hold what they got and wait until the mayor makes a determination on how we go forward. But those were the main things that we had outstanding.
Thank you, Marquis. Very excellent report, and I know you and your colleagues have been working very hard, and thank you for that. Anybody have any questions or comments about Marquis' report? No one? Well, let me kick it off, and other people can jump in. So on your last point about advertising, promoting the sandbox, I think you're absolutely right. We're certainly headed in the direction of recommending it, but I think first we need to report to Ms. Woods, and then ultimately the report will go to the mayor for her consideration. And as you said, Marquis, I can't imagine that she would reject the concept, whether it would be tweaked or whatever. We should probably wait at least until we get her approval. Now after that, and depending on when that would come, we probably would want to talk more about whether if I'll say it this way, when we get the green light from the mayor, whether we would want to start either the sandbox, the members, the government, whether any of the businesses who are interested should start promoting it before the council has acted on the legislation, is something we could, think about now and maybe, discuss more at a later time. There could be, I could see benefits of we get the word out and there's some excitement. It may prompt the council to act expeditiously. On the other hand, if for whatever reason they didn't act or they didn't act in a timely manner, then it kind of puts us out there where we are maybe not delivering on what we recommend. So anyway, that's the pros and cons about getting in front of the council as well. But anybody have any thoughts about that? Everybody's very quiet today. Okay, well,
but I will submit this to you, Mr. Shepard. I mean, I agree with you, and I think that this is an opportunity that helps our case. The SSC has been looking for incentivization methods to include people in participating, and with companies like Block Apps, with Burst IQ, having the footprint that they have with innovators thousands of people, them saying, hey, DC's trying to do something, could spur a lot of participation and help us to put in missing pieces that we may not even realize that we have. I myself am the leader of the healthcare working group for the Government Blockchain Association, an industry association here based in DC, and we have a footprint of around 15,000 members globally, and a lot of these people have done the Sandbox dance and are excited to hear Sandbox is being built and want to lend their support and their help. And so if we can make a determination to leverage this in our favor for the furtherance of the Sandbox effort, I think it would be valuable to do so.
I agree. Anytime we can get some endorsements, recommendations, publicity, favorable publicity from the tech sector, there's no reason in my mind not to be in favor of that, and I think we should wholeheartedly support that. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Dana, this is Tom. Are you contemplating having the bill introduced as permanent legislation, or are you going to go emergency temp permanent? And if that's the case, then it can, once it gets past the emergency introduction, it can be pretty much implemented.
Well, I don't think we haven't really discussed that. I don't think we've given much consideration to that. If it's the will of the council, this council, to do the legislation on an emergency basis, I think we should probably mention that, and we would have to provide a good justification for that in the report. Otherwise, I would guess, and Mr. Washington could correct me if I'm wrong, the mayor would probably just introduce it on a standard, regular basis. But there's no harm in asking, but they would have to be a valid emergency in order to do that.
Yeah, I would say losing, getting the opportunity to work with innovators in the space may be, something that we can put into the report and show that as being valuable. So, I mean.
Okay, sure. So if the group is in favor of that, that's certainly fine with us. The one thing Marky was speaking about, I sat in on the Burst IQ presentation. I missed the first one. It may be helpful as I'm thinking about this, and others can chime in, whether we should at some point, or maybe if we agree that we're going to base our legislation on the Arizona model, I was thinking either it may be helpful to us to either share our draft, or if depending on the timetable, which we will talk about here shortly, if that's not feasible, whether we just sort of say, hey, we're thinking about Arizona, and is there anything in the Arizona law or not in the Arizona law that the industry would like to see, so that when we do send it up, if there are any changes that we want to make, we would do that preferably up front, and the mayor would consider, as opposed to sending her something and then having to come back later and tweak it after we've shared it with the industry. So it's just something to think about. When we will have to sort of talk about where we are in terms of the final report and the legislation before we leave the meeting today. But does anybody think it would be valuable to get the input from the tech industry or financial services industry on the Arizona model?
Hey, Dana, it's Jigger. I think it would be valuable to get that, just especially from a kind of a legal background, to get it how it actually works for them. I think it would be helpful to get that, not just in a theoretical way, but how it works in actual practice.
So do we have?
I would agree with that as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I would agree with that as well.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, this is Omar. I also agree, and I'm wondering, sorry I joined late, but I'm wondering if it's worth getting it on the Arizona model, or what we're initially kind of soliciting comment for what we're initially recommending.
So I think let's put a pin in that. I think generally it sounds like at least the people who've spoken up are in favor of sharing what we're planning to do. And I think if we could revisit that in the in the new business discussion when we start talking about our timeline. So what we want to do is to kind of look at where we are in the calendar in terms of the fiscal year, and then talk a little bit about that. And then as part of that discussion, if we could, consider at this point whether we have time. I mean, Christian has already put the Arizona the Arizona law into the DC format, so it's pretty much ready to go. So the question would be, we just share that. But if we could, I think it kind of fits in better with the discussion on the timeline. If we could revisit that in a minute or two, and I think it'll come together nicely. It's in terms of the report that Marquis provided. Are there any other questions or comments about that? Hearing none, I will say, Marquis, we will again circle back to Octo. I think just as a reminder to the group, what we have committed, or I guess what the mayor has ordered us to provide, is a report recommendation one way or the other, and legislation. So we may or may not get everything we need from Octo in terms of infrastructure. There may be some budgetary things we need to work through. There may be some other considerations, promotion, things we talked about a little bit today, but we don't necessarily have to have everything finished by the end of the fiscal year. So there will be some opportunities to continue to work on that. So we will try to circle back to Octo and see if we can get some movement, and maybe we could even catch up with Ms. Parker at some point, and she might be able to help us.
Yeah. And just to interject on that point, we don't expressly need Octo's input at this juncture, but we on the structure committee thought that it was the professional courtesy thing to do, since we're going to be playing in their neighborhood. Having had the conversations with the director of infrastructure, he had said that creating an environment like the Sandbox is not anything that the district has done in the past, so they may not have any guidance. The guidance that we compiled about the architecture that we suggest is independent on whether or not the district has those resources available, is already paying for them. So we've been trying to frame our input so that it just gives the information as plainly that this is what we calculate as required, and then we can always loop Octo in if we need an accounting of what it's really going to cost, what do we have versus what do we have to buy versus what do we have to contract out for.
That's helpful. So, I'm thinking, obviously we don't have to have it all figured out right now, but there could be some benefits to putting in the report a section on what we've attempted to do with Octo, is specifically what our ask is, what information, if any, we have been provided, and what's outstanding, because we could leave that out and just deal with that after the report is submitted, or by putting it in there to say, maybe in Arizona, this is what their technology office has done, or maybe not. This is what we think makes sense in the District of Columbia. This is the role that we would ask Octo to play. And that might actually, once the mayor and city administrator, others get involved and see the report, it actually might get some traction as opposed to coming from us. So we'll have to think about, in terms of drafting the report, whether we want to include anything that Octo's role, whether to put anything in there, and if we put something in there, how much we put in there. So something to think about. Anybody else before we move to the next committee report? Okay. Anybody from the market or the Legislative Regulatory Committee like to make a report? Okay. Hearing none, then we can move on to the next agenda item is new business. So let's talk a little bit about the first item there, the committee deliverables. This is what Christian and I have been thinking about. And again, it's just we've been tossing around the ideas, but it's really up to the group to decide what works best for them, for us, I guess. In terms of the submission, we were thinking that each committee, the members would get together and they would draft whatever language they want to put in their particular section of the report, and basically submit that in three parts, and then we would combine the sections, the input from the three committees into a draft report. So does that work for everyone? Is any thoughts, comments, agreement on that? Is that what the committees were thinking of doing?
Yes, I think creating our own committee report is key. But I think in terms of us as a council signing off on the report, it'd be important to read the entire report once that is in.
Sure. Okay.
Agree with Omar. Yeah, we had conversations with the SSC where we wanted to make sure that the nuances that we are investigating and researching and some of the experience that we have is exemplified in the submission. But yeah, I agree with Omar. If we come up with our own thing and then feed it to Disby for the final buttoning up and the cleaning up, and then we can review it all to make sure that our message is being appropriately stated. I think that's the best way to go.
Anybody have any other thoughts about that?
No, this is Tom. I just want to ask a question, Dana. Is the proposed bill, because I know Kristen sent out I think you said it was a DC version of what Arizona has enacted. Is the proposed bill separate from the report itself?
So I think, as I recall, the mayor's order, if we recommend that we establish a sandbox, that we would attach draft legislation. So it would just be an attachment A, if you will, to the report. But it would go to the mayor at the same time. Okay,
and then is the application also a separate document?
Yeah, the application, I think it is, and I don't think the order, the mayor's order doesn't speak to the application. I think we have some time to work on application and follow up with Octo, and there'll be a lot of things that will happen between the time we submit the report and the draft legislation before it gets approved, and there may be some things, questions and back and forth. So we'll have plenty of time to work on applications and that sort of thing. With regulations, if we have to do regulations, we'll be able to do that. Okay. Anybody else? So going back to the discussion we had a few minutes ago, is there anyone on and I was going to say the Legislative Regulatory Committee, if you could take the lead on sharing, disseminating the draft legislation. But as I'm talking, it probably makes more sense because everybody has a different contacts and networks. That if really the entire group feel free to take the draft and share it with anyone that you do believe would be helpful. I think we need to kind of talk a little bit in a minute in terms of turnaround. But I think that at this point, it seems to me the most valuable thing that the Legislative Regulatory Committee could do, because I don't anticipate there being a lot of information in that particular section of the report, other than we recommend the Arizona model or the model we attach, and this is why. And so it doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot of writing in order to do that. But if the group could share the draft with the people that they think would be helpful in providing comments, I think it would be good if we need to add anything or take anything out, that we have an opportunity to review any proposed changes to the legislation. So does that make sense? Does it not make sense?
Assuming, Dana, you're talking about the version that Kristen passed around, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I sent you guys a track changes version of that particular bill. Is that something that probably should be passed around to folks? Because I had went through that Arizona model and made some changes already.
Okay, well, we could accept your changes, or maybe we just leave them tracked, and then we can send that out to the committee. Christian, you have that?
And Dana, I was going to actually ask, because we in the structure group had also sent around like a markup last month, and it would be great if there was like a consolidated new draft or version of the report that we could use as like a starting point now.
Yep.
That incorporates everybody's comments.
So I recall seeing comments on the draft report, but what I was suggesting, at least right now, was with respect to the legislation, not the actual draft report. If we want to get, I think when we were discussing earlier, we were saying that it would probably be helpful if there should be any changes to the legislation, the draft legislation, that we incorporate those changes into our final proposal to the mayor. But I was not suggesting that we share the draft report with anyone outside of the council.
Okay, my misunderstanding, but I certainly would appreciate like an updated draft of the report.
So, because I don't think, just so we're clear, I don't think it would be appropriate to share the report, and I don't know how useful that would be, but I think it would be useful based on what we talked about earlier, is if there's anything in the legislation that needs to be tweaked, that we want to present that as part of our proposal to the mayor. So I don't recall seeing anyone making any changes to the draft legislation, but I could be wrong.
Right. Well, we do have Tom's edits, so I'm not sure if anyone else made edits to the draft legislation that we sent around, but we do have those.
So we could send that back around so people can send that out, and then in the legislation, and then people can get whatever comments they need to get, and then at the same time we will accept the changes that were submitted to the draft report, and then we'll share that again. But again, that's just for the council's benefit, not for anyone outside of the council.
Right.
So we'll get right on that. is before I want to talk about timeline next. Are there any other comments or questions before we get to the schedule? Okay. So this is what our thinking is in terms of making an effort we didn't comply with the initial mayor's order, but Ms. Woods would like us to, as we've discussed previously, to try to get a final report by 9:30. So and by that we mean, I'm pretty sure we mean there's a internal document tracking approval system. It would go into that system on 9:30. And there's several people in the executive office of the mayor who will have to review it before it would obviously get to the mayor's office. And so when we say September 30, we don't necessarily mean it would be on her desk by September 30, but it would be working its way through the process. So with that said, we were looking at the calendar today and thinking about how we would work backwards. We do have two more meetings, the 10th and the 24th, correct, Kristen? Is that
That's right.
the 10th? The 10th.
September 10th and September 24th.
Okay. So so on our end, one of the things we would like to do is we would like to take the Word document and we would like to make it a glossy report, if you will, with some graphics and pictures and whatnot. And we have a vendor that we use for that, and I've been told that they would probably need 7 days to complete that work. And so one of the things that I was suggested that we could do is they could start working on a draft with the actual language and start putting together the pictures and all of the layout even before the actual document is final. And so we would looking at the calendar, would like to try to get a pretty final draft, certainly no later than the 18th of September. So with that in mind, what I'd like to propose to the group today is the following. So we would ideally like to get from each of the three committees their draft report by August 28th, which is a Friday, and that's approximately 2 weeks from today. And from there, Christian and I would review the report and get it a draft out to the commissioner by no later than the 4th. I mean, if it's in good shape, we could probably get it out the 2nd or the 3rd. But we like to at least maybe have 3 days or so to get a draft report out to the commissioner so that she could take a look at it, and the deputy take a look at that, get their initial feedback, and then get a draft with the commissioner and deputy's comments, suggested changes, etc., back to the council by somewhere around the 10th of September, so that the council would actually be able to see, which hopefully will be a fairly final draft, provide any comments, suggestions, and get those back to us. So if we get comments back to the council by the 10th, if we could get any changes back by the 14th or 15th, first part of the week, we could then make those changes and get the draft report to the graphic designer by the end of that week, by the somewhere around that 17th, 18th, somewhere around there. That would then, and we could still look at the language. We would probably get a markup of what the final report would look like with the graphics in it sometime around the 22nd, 23rd, and we'd have a week to make any final changes so that we could get everybody's input on both the content as well as the graphics and get it in the system by 9:30. So any questions, comments, concerns about that approach?
So just to recap, each of the committees having their preliminary submissions to you by the 28th. So 2 weeks hence.
Yeah, let's maybe take one at a time. So is that something that you think that's feasible? 2 weeks?
Because I think you can build on to the edits that you made to the preliminary version of the report that we sent around. So you don't have to start, the committees don't have to start from whole cloth. You can build on what you already kind of edited before.
And I know that the structure committee has been sending in weekly reports. So some of what the work that you've done is already written. It would just need to kind of be consolidated into a final submission. But the question is, again, does 2 weeks give you enough time to put together a fairly good draft? Again, for just your section, there would be an introduction, background, and all of that. The Christian and I will focus on that. The committees would just have the various sections the work that they did, what they looked at, and what they recommend. And then that would just get folded into the overall report. And then obviously at some point, as I stated, we would circulate everything back so everybody would get to see a combined final report so that they could provide additional comments and see the overall picture, not just their particular section.
And Dana, and I think that would work. But the only thing that I want to be sure of is that we know if the comments that we already gave work for Disby. So it's extremely important for us just to see if those were acceptable, because that was the path that we were on. So we want to make sure that we are going down the right path. So if you could get us back an updated draft of the document incorporating our comments, or giving us some kind of feedback if you don't agree with them. If you could do that by Monday, say, or Tuesday, then that would give us a week and a half to 10 days to try to turn it around.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, Christian and I mean, it's not our goal, and we haven't shared this with the commissioner yet. So, but it's not our goal at this point to decide to accept or reject any comments. So we're happy to include your submissions and then recirculate that. That's very easy to do. We can do that right away. So, I mean, ultimately, I don't know how this will work. But I mean, it's the report of the council. So we'll have to figure out how to, if we hopefully we can agree on the final language, but we'll figure it out. But if there's somebody that said we should say it this way and somebody else says we have to say it a different way, we'll have to just try to keep working until we reach consensus. But the goal is that everyone be satisfied with the language in the report, and it's very much a group project, not a we submitted and some got rejected and some language didn't. So We'll get that back to you. Anybody else have any comments or questions about the timeline? So, and Christian, can you, when you can, I mean, I assume, you could just, I don't know if you can send a clean version, you can send a track version back to everyone, and then we could include in the email just a summary of the proposed schedule so everyone will see it.
Sure, that's no problem. And we're talking about we're back to the report now, not the legislation. Or both.
Right. So yeah. So I think again. I think So I'm glad you brought that up. So what we'll do is we'll send back. And we should be able to do it tomorrow. We'll take the comments that we got on the report. We'll send those back tracked. We'll also send a clean version. So we'll have both of those. And then we will share the legislation with Tom's track changes and a clean version. So we'll have 4 documents. And then what we'll do is, so again, it's up to the group, consistent with the timeline that we will also include, is if you want to share the legislation with someone who may have some constructive comments, feel free to do so. But just ask them to return it in the next 2 weeks so that we can get whatever changes into the system. And I guess that's not as hard of a deadline because the important thing is we got to put the report together. Probably could have a few more days if someone wanted to look at the legislation a little longer. We don't necessarily have to have that back at the same time. But the goal would be is to get everyone's comments back on everything by the 28th or close there or thereabout. So we'll give you all the documents tomorrow so that you can share it and get everything back to us in a timely manner. So any other questions or comments? Is everybody clear about next steps? And if feel free if you do have any questions when you get the email from Christian about anything, let us know. We'll be happy to answer any questions if anything's not really clear. Any further discussion? Sounds like we have a consensus on the schedule. So we don't need to vote on anything. We'll just send it around and ask everybody to do their best to adhere to that so we can wrap this up, at least the first part. All right. And is there anything else before we adjourn for the day? No. Okay. So can we get a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
That was Tom, right? I think that was.
For the motion, who seconded?
I don't think we got a second yet. I think Tom moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Jigger seconds. Sorry.
Treasurer and Jigger.
I think Treasurer beat it. So we'll go with Treasurer on the second for this one. All right. Before I run through, did any other council members join in the interim who haven't acknowledged themselves? Any other council members? Any members?
Omar, Christian.
Omar is here. Okay. All right. Very good. And are there any members of the public on the call? Any members of the public?
But actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. Almost forgot. So before we wrap up, there is one more thing. So the next meeting on the 10th we will have a draft for the council meeting, and it will be open for discussion. And hopefully we won't have a lot of wordsmithing, but whatever we have that on the 10th. So we're going to have to figure out when we announce the next session, whether it will be the next meeting, whether it will be entirely executive session, or whether or not we start the meeting as a public meeting, and then if there are any public participants, whether we will have to excuse them so that we can actually discuss the report. Because again, we do not want to discuss the report in the company of people who are not on the council, except in the department staff accepted. But anyway, I didn't want to forget that, just as a heads up, that would and that probably would be at least the case for the last meeting. Again, if not the entire meeting, part of the meeting, if we have any further deliberations on the draft. So we would definitely I just want to mention that to you as a matter of order for the next meeting. So any questions about that? Concerns?
And we'll figure out the most appropriate way to do it. So
yeah, I mean, I guess we don't have any public participants today. If we don't get any next time, then we'll just have to, it should be easy. We just have to make sure no one joins late. That's a member of the public. But otherwise, if we do, we usually only get one or two people. So we'll work it out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, with that, then we should have the roll call.
Okay. This is on the motion to adjourn. Shahar.
Yes.
Omar.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Salmon. I'll come back around. Elizabeth.
Yes.
Jigger.
Yes.
Tom.
Tom?
I did. Tom.
Yes.
Renee.
Yes.
Treasure.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Dana.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Salmon one more time.
He may have dropped from the call. I don't see him in the list anymore.
Okay. Well, nonetheless, the motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate all your hard work, and look forward to seeing your drafts and meeting with you again. Stay safe until next time we meet.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you.
The committee is adjourned. It's 5:06 p.m.
Thank you.
Everybody take it easy.
Bye-bye.